Hi, I'm Stacy Mormon. I am the instructional coach here at North Cedar Junior Senior High School, and I just want to take a little bit of time to talk about standards-based grading, why we use that here at the high school, and kind of what you can expect to see in your students' grades. So a good place to start is just to compare standards-based grading to traditional grading. Now, traditional grading is kind of what most of us probably grew up with. In traditional grading, students earn points by completing all kinds of different assignments, and they get grades on basically everything they do that then gets averaged into one final course grade. So they would earn points from projects, assignments, practice, tests, all of those things, and then that all gets put into one final course grade. Now, standards-based grading, what we use here at the high school, is different. Instead of getting points for everything they do, they're only going to get assessment scores for assessments on their priority standards. Now, the reason that we do that is we want their grade to represent what the student is actually able to do and whether or not they have mastered the tasks and skills that they need to move on to the next level. Okay, so that's kind of the main difference. Traditional grading, everything gets averaged together into one final grade. In standards-based grading, you don't get points for practice assignments, you only earn scores for grades on priority standards. Okay, so let's take a look at an example to kind of see what would look different about that and maybe why we prefer standards-based grading over traditional grading. Okay, so what you see on your screen right now is an example like final course grades for a couple fictional students in a foods class. Now, in a foods class, kids learn things like how to cook, food preparation, food safety, those kinds of things, all right? So at the end of a foods class, you would hopefully end up with some basic cooking skills, okay, and a little bit of extra stuff on top of that. So in this example, just looking at their final course grades, Sally got a 43% and she got an F, she failed the class. Joey got 99% and got an A, all right? Now looking at that just based on those final grades, if we think about who would want to cook for you, well, probably Joey. He's got the higher grade, right? Okay, but let's look at where those grades actually came from and those scores and those points actually came from. In a traditional setting, in a traditional grading system, here's what Joey's 99% A could possibly look like, okay? So in traditional grading, there's points for everything. So he got points for doing his homework. He got some points for doing cooking labs, all kinds of different things. Now, if we look at that, yeah, he did well on the homework assignments. He got A's on all of those practice things. But when he got to the actual cooking lab, kind of the assessment for that class, he didn't do so well, okay? So when I see discrepancies like that, what I'm thinking is maybe, it's hard to know why kids would do so well on practice and not on a test. It might be that they're copying off of somebody else or they're getting a lot of support at home, things like that. So the assessment score kind of is more it's a more controlled environment for seeing where those scores are coming from. And in the cooking labs where he actually had to show what he could do, he couldn't do the skills he needed to pass the class. So that A isn't really telling us a whole lot about what Joey can actually do in a traditional grading system. Okay? Now, on the other hand, let's look at Sally. Sally failed the class. She didn't even pass it. If she wants that credit, she'll have to take that class over again. But if we look at where her scores came from, for whatever reason, she didn't do the homework assignments. So those are all zeros. But when she took the test, when she did the cooking labs, she got almost perfect both times. So Sally is the one that is actually able to do the skills that course requires, even though she failed the class in a traditional grading system. So that's kind of what we hope standard-based grading can make a little bit more clear for us. It kind of takes out all of those scores for practice, gives kids a chance to actually learn from their practice without the stakes of having points assigned to it. And then we can see what they can actually do on their assessments, and that's what their final course grade comes from, is they're showing a proficiency, their scores, on their assessments and not on the practice assignments. Okay? So those are kind of some of the things we think about. That's a base level of why we choose to use standard-based grading over traditional grading. All right, so let's talk about our actual grading scale here at the junior high school and the senior high school. We use a 4-point scale, so that means every time your student takes an assessment on a priority standard, so a skill that we've decided is really important for passing that class, they're going to get a score of either a 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0 on that standard for that assessment. Okay? So 0 means lack of evidence. That usually means that the student did not complete the assignment at all, or what they turned in didn't have anything to do with the topic they were being assessed on. Emerging, or a 1, means that they attempted the skill, but they were not able to do much of it. They weren't able to do much of it with any accuracy. If they scored developing, that would be a 2. It means they're really close. There's just a couple things that they probably need to strengthen or work on before reaching proficiency. A 2 can also mean that they were proficient, but they needed help to be proficient. 3 would be proficient. That's the level that we are always shooting for. We want students to be proficient in all of the priority standards in the courses that they are taking by the end of the term. And then a 4 would be advanced. It means they can show that they are above and beyond the proficient level for that standard. So they'll get a 4-point score on each standard on every assessment that they take. All right, now a big question we get is, what about responsibility? Like, don't we want kids still to do their homework assignments and turn their homework assignments in? Yes, absolutely, we definitely do. And in a lot of courses, you will see that teachers still track homework assignments. They use either check marks or missing symbols in the grade book to show whether or not that student is completing those assignments. But at the end of the day, we look at homework assignments as practice, and we want students to have the comfort level to try out things, to maybe get some things wrong on their practice without having to worry about getting a score. And we want to kind of take out the other factors of what other things go into homework at home. Like, some kids have a lot of support at home and can do well on their homework assignments because they have people helping them, or because they have a friend that they copy off of, things like that. We don't want those things to count towards their final grade if we're going to say that they're actually passing that class and able to do those skills. We do also have the ability to add responsibility standards into course grades. We just don't group them all together with other academic standards. If we're going to use or score responsibility, time management, organization, things like that, it has to be a separate standard, so that when we look at where the student is struggling, we can tell, well, is it a skill issue or is it a management issue? We can kind of figure that out so that we're working on the right things with the students, and not focusing in on what they don't need. Okay. So when you're looking in Power School, we still require students to finish their homework assignments as much as possible, because if they don't do the practice, they're probably not going to do as well on their assessments, but it doesn't get included in their final course grade. Looking at final course grades, here is our percentage scale. So as I said before, every time they take an assessment, they're going to get a 4-point scale for each standard that's on that assessment. At the end of the grading term, or even during the grading term, when you see a final course grade next to their course, what that is doing is taking those final standard scores they received, and each standard score, so all the separate standards, are then averaged to a final percentage grade, so that we can give a final grade for the course, and still be able to have a GPA and class rankings and all those sorts of things. So we still have those even with standards-based grading. It's just how we get there and what gets included in those course grades is a little bit different than traditional. Okay, so this is kind of showing how our 4-point scale lines up with our letter grade scale. That's where those percentages come from, is those 4, 3, 2, 1 zeros that they get on their standards. I will say high school math and science courses work just a little bit differently because of the content of their courses just works a little bit better if they enter it into PowerSchool a little bit differently, but the same principles apply, the same overall theories. Okay, I'm going to stop there with this video. There will be there's another video coming that will talk about PowerSchool and what our grades look like in PowerSchool and what you should be using to check grades there. So if that's something you want to take a look at, please join us for the next video. Thanks.